While everybody's scared of the Bitcoin price crashing to $92,000 today, two massive trillion-dollar banks have made a little bit of an interesting move into Bitcoin. Standard Chartered just came out and raised their previous Bitcoin price predictions to $500,000 per coin. And then the second trillion-dollar bank we've seen make a very interesting pivot into Bitcoin came from Franklin Templeton. And as you guys can see, they just launched Bitcoin indexes for their massive $1.4 trillion client base. So today I want to ask the question, do these trillion-dollar banks know something about Bitcoin that we don't? Why are they making a move into Bitcoin at a time when the markets are melting down just a little bit? Today I'm going to be discussing all of that and more with my fellow co-founder of Bitcoin News, Rob Wallace. How you doing today, Rob?
Doing well. How you doing, Luke?
I'm doing great. What are your thoughts on these massive trillion-dollar banks?
Well, we are going to at least match gold market cap at some point, right? And gold is hitting new all-time high after new all-time high. We are currently at $2,967 for gold. Remember, gold hit $2,000 back in 2011 or so, and then just wavered for a decade. And people thought that they had solved inflation, that they could just do all these QE between 2009 to 2015, blow up the money supply, and it wouldn't matter too much. But then we got to COVID and it got back up to $2,000 per ounce for gold. And then it languished again from 2020 to just the end of 2024. And now we've seen this exponential takeoff. So what does that mean? I think that means that we've got serious issues with the dollar, that there is a global monetary reordering going on before our very eyes. And the funny thing is, so few people know that gold has any value in this world today. Like, I just saw a video online, dude walking around on the street, he has one gold ounce, right? And a gold ounce is like this big. It's not that impressive if you don't know what it's worth. And so people are like, hey, would you give me $20 for this, right? They wouldn't do it. It's 1/100th of the price. They wouldn't do it. So I mean, it's crazy what is happening behind the scenes, and you've got to know, you've got to educate yourself at this time. We are at a pivotal point in human history, in monetary history, and if you don't know what's going on behind the scenes, if you are not educating yourself, you could be left behind, even if you live in a developed country like America.
Yeah, well, this is the thing about monetary transitions I think a lot of people don't understand. The everyday person, the lower and the middle class, they typically get absolutely wiped out in these monetary transitions because they don't pay attention to charts like the one that you literally mentioned. The price of gold is going absolutely bananas. I didn't realize that it was this parabolic. But again, the lower and the middle class, they typically don't have exposure to assets like real estate, like stocks that are going absolutely parabolic today. They store the majority of their assets in things like cash, and cash gets massively devalued in these monetary transitions, which is something I think that we're currently going through today, Rob. I think we are in some sort of a transition. And I think the price of gold is kind of like that alarm bell on the fiat system saying something is happening. And I think we need to be paying more attention to what these mega trillion-dollar banks are doing. Again, these guys are not small hitters. They both have assets under management somewhere around $1 trillion. And both of these guys have been recently making a move into Bitcoin. We can see Franklin Templeton, they've got a $1.68 trillion of assets under management. That's huge. And Standard Chartered, depending upon how you measure it, they kind of have around $800+ billion worth of assets. This is a little bit of a Google here, and Google's telling us they've got about $850 billion worth of assets as of 2024. So both of them are around that $1 trillion mark. And I think we need to watch what both of them are saying, but more importantly, doing with their own assets and their own funds. And they are slowly but surely just making that move into Bitcoin. Have you seen the more recent prediction by Standard Chartered, Rob, when they're talking about $500,000 Bitcoin by 2028?
Yeah, I mean, that's another cycle from now, essentially, right? So if we say we peak along the power law projections, right, between 200 to 300,000 K by the end of this year, which is kind of hard to imagine, right? I mean, we're already 2 months down in 2025, and many people have been calling for the peak of this bull market at the end of this year, right, between October through December. And according to power law projections, I know how much you hate the power law, but has been a decent predictor in the past, right? And so that calls for 200 to 300,000 by the end of this year. But again, we've entered into this new era with institutions and the ETFs, MicroStrategy, buying up double the amount of issuance per day. And so there is this constant bid. As we were talking about last live stream, 90K seems to be this floor that will not be broken. And we saw a sell-off today, and we're still well above 90, right? So there are buyers at this mid to low 90s area, but we've yet to see that catalyst to really take us into that parabolic stage of the bull market as we saw in 2021 and in 2017.
Yeah, I think the fact that we're now watching TradFi, and a lot of people begin to come to the consensus that, $500,000 Bitcoin is programmed, that's when I start to, my spidey senses start to say, hang on a minute, what if everybody's wrong? Because Bitcoin does like to punish everybody. And like you say, I mean, the power law has been very accurate for 16 years now. For me, I get worried when people think they can outsmart the market and people start to project exactly where the price of Bitcoin is going. And we're even seeing this with very popular big Twitter accounts saying, look, $500,000 by 2028. It could come. It certainly could come. I want to jump back on over to the report from Standard Chartered. We can see they're predicting $200,000 Bitcoin by 2025 and potentially $500,000 Bitcoin in 2028. Like you say, Rob, that does kind of map what the Bitcoin power law is projecting. Okay. If we do pull up the Bitcoin power law, you will be able to see that these projections by Standard Chartered kind of align with the projections made with the Bitcoin power law model. So here it is, and you can see Bitcoin is supposedly going to continue to see these diminishing returns and the price action neatly fit within these bands. Again, so far, don't get me wrong, my hat's off to Giovanni. Bitcoin has followed a power law until now. Who knows what it's going to do in the future? That's my biggest concern, my biggest question mark. But I do think it's interesting that we are seeing huge entities right now put their reputation on the line and talk about these massive Bitcoin predictions. And something I want to remind the people of about Standard Chartered is they were making Bitcoin predictions when it wasn't fun or it wasn't cool to be talking about $100,000 Bitcoin. Standard Chartered was making Bitcoin predictions when it was around $25,000, $30,000 a coin in the depths of the bear market just before the ETFs launched. Standard Chartered were predicting $100,000 Bitcoin by 2025. At the time, they were called crazy. People were saying, all of the TradFi was saying, there's no way Bitcoin's going to hit $100,000. I think the consensus in late 2023, early 2024, was that BlackRock's Bitcoin ETF was going to be used as exit liquidity. This is what everybody was saying. They were saying, oh, BlackRock's just dumping on your bags. BlackRock's dumping on the Bitcoin hodlers. And I think Standard Chartered, I mean, their reputation really does speak for itself. They were bullish on Bitcoin when it wasn't cool to be bullish on Bitcoin, which is why I think it's interesting that we see another report and another forecast about Bitcoin's price come out from Standard Chartered in early February. And they're once again still bullish on Bitcoin, despite the price potentially being a little bit boring to some people. I mean, again, when you really zoom out, I don't think there's much boring about this price action. That's because I have the Bitcoin price in monthly. But again, we know that most people suffer from recency bias, myself included. And when you do kind of have a look at Bitcoin on a more recent time frame, you can see we haven't really done much for 3 months now. Bitcoin's been going sideways. It's really starting to bore people to sleep. But I think the signal here, Rob, is the big boys are still coming. They're still buying, and they don't seem to be slowing down.
Yeah, and they're not buying your meme coin, right? They launched an Ethereum ETF and it's done horribly.
Mhm.
These other altcoins that have been around for a while, like Litecoin and Cardano, they seem to be getting ETFs under this new SEC regime. But at the same time, I don't think that's going to be doing much for these alternatives to Bitcoin. There is only one king, and Bitcoin is it. And the interesting thing that I saw in that article you had up is that Standard Chartered said that each year for the next 4 years, it'd be going up by 100,000. If you scroll down to that highlighted section, I think it said 200K this year, 300K 2026. Yeah, in 2027, 400, and then 500 in 2028. So that leaves no room for a bear market, right? These guys see a continuous growth going up $100,000 a year. And I mean, some people might call that boring, but that would actually be probably the best thing ever if Bitcoin had no bear market and was just gradually stair stepping up 100K a year. Can you imagine?
It's going up forever, Rob. That's it is pretty interesting. I still haven't come to a conclusion on what we're going to see this bull market. Like heading into this bull market, I'm the most unsure on what we are going to see. I think you make a good point though, and I think so does RT in the Twitter chat. Bybit could be responsible for this little bit of volatility we're seeing in the markets today, and we are seeing volatility not just in Bitcoin but also the TradFi markets. I want to talk a little bit more later in the stream about the volatility that we're seeing in places like the volatility index, which is just pumped by 35% over the past 4 weeks. So there is a little bit of volatility, not just in the Bitcoin market, but also in the general TradFi market. I think before we get there, I think it's worth just nailing that point. That's also kind of brought up here by RT, and that's the fact that Bybit is responsible for this. Again, why did Bybit get hacked? I think a contributing factor could be the fact that, altcoins are in the mix over there at Bybit. Again, having altcoins in your hardware wallet or in your exchange, it adds a tax surface to whatever security protocol you might think you have. This is why we always encourage you guys, steer away from altcoins, just buy Bitcoin. We think Bitcoin is the only thing you should be buying and playing around with. There really is no second best when it comes to buying Bitcoin. Again, if you guys are looking for somewhere to buy your Bitcoin, we always encourage you guys to check out what Rhino Bitcoin is doing. We think they're the best place for you guys to get started buying your Bitcoin. You can buy Bitcoin on the app. You can sell Bitcoin on the app. You can even use the Rhino app to send Bitcoin anywhere around the world that you want to send it using the Lightning Network. This is, again, a very, very important thing. I think that is lost amongst many Bitcoin wallets. The accessibility and the ability to use Lightning. I'm down here in Bitcoin jungle in Costa Rica, and there are 400 merchants that accept Bitcoin. And all of that is done on the Lightning Network. So again, if you are looking for someone to buy Bitcoin, highly recommend you check out what Rhino Bitcoin is doing. They're even going to be giving you guys $10 of free Bitcoin if you sign up using the app, and if you use a promo code Bitcoin News. It's Bitcoin News, one word, but you do need a capital B and a capital N for Bitcoin and news. So make sure you do that to take advantage of that $10 discount you can get from Bitcoin News. But Rob, I want to talk a little bit more about what exactly is going on in the store of value space. You reminded me, you brought up the fact that gold right now is going absolutely parabolic. I think this is a massive warning sign that something could be happening, alongside the fact that the VIX is rising. I think whenever the VIX is rising, that is when we need to start paying attention to not just Bitcoin, but the TradFi markets. So do you see anything potentially on the horizon here in the realm of macro? I know a lot of people are kind of, let's say they're not so scared about recessions and incoming threats. I'm not either personally, but have you seen anything fly across your desk that might explain why we are seeing the volatility pick up in TradFi markets and what this might mean for Bitcoin if we do see a little correction or a little crash?
Yeah, so I think we got to zoom out a little bit, go back to Joe Biden's presidency, where they were just issuing a lot of debt, right? And using the stimulus measures, such as the COVID the Infrastructure Act that was nothing to do, the Inflation Reduction Act, which had nothing to do with reducing inflation. No, they were just spending a bunch of money, printing a bunch of money, sending it out to government programs and getting it into the pockets of people, which we know at the end of the day rises prices. It might help GDP in the short term, of course, but overall, the more money they print, of course, you have less purchasing power. Then we get to Trump. And we have Trump's election, and we have a bit of euphoria. Bitcoin jumps from 60,000 up to 95,000. There's animal spirits out there. People think this is going to be the best business environment in the history of America. It's going to be completely unregulated. Companies are going to be able to do whatever they want. And then Trump actually gets in office, and then we start to see some of the things that he's talking about. And it turns out this talk of tariffs is not just talk, but it's the real deal. There might have been a pause on the tariffs that are going on Canada and Mexico, but he's still real about them. He gave them a month to get their stuff together to meet his demands. But if that month comes to a close and they haven't, 25% on all the goods coming from Canada and Mexico, two of our largest trading partners, of course. So I think we're sort of coming off that high and euphoria of the Trump election. And now we're sort of chewing on and realizing that, hey, we are in the middle of a monetary reordering. It seems as if the Trump administration understands that this is necessary, and that probably means some pain. And in the last Trump administration, the stock market was by far the most important indicator to him. As long as the stock market was going up, he thought he was doing a great job as president. Now he says his new indicator is 10-year treasuries, right? He wants to bring those 10-year treasuries down so that people can buy houses once again. You can finance businesses easier. But that's going to cause some pain. And so especially if he doesn't care as much about how well the stock market is doing, we're at all-time highs, right? Like, we've never been this high before in the stock market. So to see a pullback, a cool down makes a lot of sense. And of course, that would affect Bitcoin prices as well.
You make a really good point there about US Treasuries. I'd completely forgotten and overlooked that. And again, I think overall, I think the summary of everything we've talked about here in this first little snippet is, hey, governments cannot be trusted. We should not be trusting our governments. They're incredibly incompetent, especially considering what I just saw hit my little desk this morning.